In the most lavish wedding of the year, hosted by crime boss Sterling Blackwood, while 300 of the city's most powerful guests are raising champagne flutes in celebration, only one person hears the faint, fragile sound of a cry for help seeping from inside the wall. And that person isn't a billionaire, isn't a politician, but a 4-year-old girl, the daughter of a housekeeper. Nell tugs at her mother's hand, her eyes wide and unblinking. "Mom, the wall is talking. The wall is crying." Darcy Holloway, 27 years old, a single mother, a woman paid to be invisible in this house, presses her ear to the cold wallpaper, and she hears it, a child's voice, shaking, exhausted, desperate, from behind the brick. "Help me, please, give me water." It's Arlo, 6 years old, the groom's biological son. The boy everyone believes is away at boarding school in Connecticut. But the boy isn't in Connecticut. The boy is curled in darkness, trapped between 2 brick walls, directly beneath the feet of 300 guests who are laughing and dancing, his small hands scraping at the wall until they're bloody. And the one who locked him in there, the one who used a screw gun to seal the boards tight and then stepped back out wearing a smile, is the woman in the spotless white wedding gown, the most dazzling bride of the night, Genevieve Ashford, swaying in her new husband's arms on the dance floor. Darcy knows the truth, but Darcy also knows the price. If she speaks, she'll lose her job, the only thing keeping her from the street. She'll lose custody of Nell, because her violent ex-husband is waiting for one mistake, one slip, to snatch their daughter from her hands. Genevieve has looked her straight in the eyes and murmured, "Open your mouth, and you'll lose your daughter." A child is dying behind the wall. A mother is standing in the cruelest choice of her life. And tonight, in a mansion drenched in laughter and candlelight, only the most invisible woman in the room can save the child the whole world has forgotten. And before we step into this story, tell me where you're listening from today. Write it in the comments. I read every single one. If this story touches you, a like and a share will help more people hear it. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, this is the time. We'll be seeing each other a lot. But to understand why Darcy Holloway, a woman trained to go unnoticed, would dare to stand in the middle of the wedding of the most powerful crime boss in the city and scream the truth, we need to go back 12 hours earlier, 6 o'clock in the morning. The Blackwood estate is still drowned in darkness, but Darcy is already on her knees on the marble floor of the grand hall, both knees stinging through the thin fabric of her black uniform pants. She scrubs the floor by hand, not with a machine, because Pemberton, the head butler, says machines leave streaks, and Mr. Blackwood hates streaks. Darcy doesn't complain. She never complains. Complaining is a luxury for people who have choices, and Darcy ran out of choices a long time ago. She pauses, sits back on her heels, and glances toward the laundry room at the end of the service corridor. The door is slightly open. Inside, under a weak yellow light, Nell is sitting on the cold tile, hugging a worn teddy bear the two of them carried with them from the night they ran. The little girl is coloring, her tongue sticking out to one side in concentration. 4 years old, so small. Darcy's entire world fits inside that laundry room, a space not even 6 square meters. Darcy remembers the night they left Craig's apartment, 2 o'clock in the morning. Nell asleep on her shoulder, her head tucked against her mother's neck, her breath warm and steady. Darcy only had time to shove into a backpack 1 change of clothes, a carton of milk, diapers, and the teddy bear. She didn't take money because Craig hid it all. She didn't take her phone because Craig tracked it. She walked out the back door barefoot onto cold concrete and never looked back. For the next 3 months, the two of them lived in an old car parked behind a supermarket. Darcy washed Nell's face with bottled water in a public restroom. She begged for work everywhere, 7 places in 2 years, losing job after job because there was no one to watch Nell. Because Nell cried, because Darcy was late, because life doesn't make room for a penniless single mother. And then the Blackwood estate appeared. A hiring notice posted on a church bulletin board, looking for a housekeeper. Live in full-time, room and board included. Darcy called and told the truth, that she had a small child. Pemberton was silent for a long time on the other end of the line. Then he said, "Bring the girl, but I don't want to see her. No one is to see her. You understand me." Darcy understood. She understood better than anyone. Invisible was a skill she'd learned in the years she lived with Craig. Don't look him in the eye. Don't speak. Don't take up too much space in any room. And now that skill is what keeps a roof over their heads. Darcy wrings out the rag, dirty water running into the bucket, and she thinks of Grandpa Hank, a veteran, the only man in her life who never raised a hand to hurt anyone. He used to say, his voice rough as sandpaper, "When life pushes you up against the wall, don't turn your back. Turn around, look it in the eye, and climb over it." He died 3 years ago. Darcy didn't have money for a bus ticket home for the funeral. She cried in the laundry room, holding Nell, and promised herself she'd live in a way that honored him. Footsteps cut through her thoughts. Pemberton passes by, back straight as a ruler, eyes sweeping the grand hall. He doesn't look at Darcy. He never looks directly at the staff when he speaks, as if they're furniture that happens to move. 300 guests today, he says into the air. Everything has to be perfect. Your little girl. Keep her hidden. I don't want to see her. The guests can't see her. Mr. Blackwood can't know she exists. If there's any mistake today, even one, you and the girl are out on the street tonight. No explanations. No packing. He walks on, his heels tapping a steady rhythm on the marble. Darcy doesn't answer. She only bends down and keeps wiping the floor. But inside her chest, her heart hits harder by one beat, because she knows that behind the laundry room door, Nell is sitting there coloring, and the child has no idea how thin the roof over her head really is. Darcy is carrying a stack of spotless white tablecloths from the laundry room up to the second floor when she sees the boy. Arlo Blackwood, 6 years old, the only son of Sterling Blackwood, is sitting curled up on the back staircase. The staircase only staff use. He's wearing blue pajamas with little cars on them, clutching a pillow tight against his chest, his legs drawn up, his chin resting on his knees. His eyes are rimmed red, not the red of a child who's just cried, but the red of a child who's been crying for so long he finally stopped, because there were no tears left. Darcy freezes. The weight of the linens pulls at her arms, but she can't step past that child and say nothing. She's been taught to be invisible, but she's also a mother, and a mother's instinct doesn't come with an off switch. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Darcy asks softly, making her voice as gentle as she can, as if she's afraid of startling a sparrow. Arlo looks up, big brown eyes, full of fear, lock onto Darcy. He opens his mouth, his lips move, as if a sentence is trying to break free, but something holds it back. Something heavier than fear, something like a threat carved into bone. Then Arlo's gaze slides past Darcy's shoulder, toward the hallway behind her. His eyes go wider, not with curiosity, but with pure panic. The panic of a small animal catching the scent of a hunter. He shakes his head, fast, violent, and then he springs up and runs. He runs up the stairs, bare feet slapping the wood, not looking back. Darcy stands there, still holding the stack of cloths, staring at the empty spot where he'd been sitting. And then she smells it, jasmine perfume. A rich, expensive scent, sweet to the point of sharpness, drifting faintly from the hallway behind her. Darcy turns. No one is there. The corridor is empty, but the jasmine hangs in the air, as if someone stood close a moment ago and slipped away. Darcy knows that smell. The whole estate knows that smell. It's Genevieve Ashford's, the fragrance she leaves in every room she passes through like a mark of territory. Darcy swallows, tightens her grip on the linens, and keeps walking. Not my business. Not my business. She repeats it in her head like a prayer as she hurries toward the grand hall. But Arlo's face, those terrified brown eyes, stick to her mind like plaster dust clinging to a wall. 10 minutes later, Darcy goes down to the kitchen to get a pitcher of water for the flower arrangement team. Opal, the head cook, is standing at the massive stove, stirring a huge pot of soup with a wooden ladle nearly as long as her arm. She's a large woman with gray hair twisted up high, cheeks flushed from the heat, and she's the only person in this mansion who treats Darcy like a human being instead of a broom that happens to walk. Opal catches sight of Darcy, then glances behind her to make sure no one is listening. "Have you seen Arlo?" Opal asks, her voice low. Darcy nods. "On the back stairs. He was crying." Opal exhales, the sound heavy as lead. "That boy's changed completely," she says, still stirring, but her eyes are far away. Before she came, she doesn't say Genevieve's name, but Darcy understands. He used to laugh all the time. He'd run all over the house, tease the security guys, sneak into my kitchen to beg for cookies. He called me Miss Opal, hugged my legs every morning. Now, she stops. Now he's scared of his own shadow. Doesn't talk, doesn't smile. His eyes are always darting around like he's waiting for someone to appear. Opal lowers her voice even more, until it's almost just breath. She hates that boy. I can see it. looks at him like he's a cockroach in the pantry. But in front of Mr. Sterling, she can act, talking about loving her stepson, worrying about his future. He believes every word. Opal shakes her head, bitterness cutting through. Right after the wedding, the boy's supposed to be sent off to boarding school in Connecticut. 6 years old. Boarding school. Who ships a 6-year-old away from his father like that? But she arranged it all. Private car to take him. Early this morning, he was supposed to get in that car. Darcy frowns. Supposed to. I'm not sure, Opal says. But this morning I went up to clean his room, and I saw something off. The bed didn't look slept in, but the lamp was still on, like someone turned it on and walked away and forgot to switch it off. Or, she doesn't finish the thought. Footsteps outside the kitchen door make them both go silent. A server rushes in to grab a tray, then rushes out. Opal turns back to the soup. Darcy takes the pitcher and heads out. At the doorway, she stops, turns back. Miss Opal, the seat for Arlo at the wedding. I saw it set up in the front row a few days ago when I was cleaning the ballroom. Is it still there? Opal looks at her. Her expression weighted down. This morning she told Pemberton to remove it. Said the boy left last night. No seat needed. Darcy walks out of the kitchen with the cold pitcher in her hands, and something even colder spreading from her chest down into her stomach. Arlo's lamp still on. The bed with no crease of sleep, the chair taken away, and the child's eyes on the stairs this morning, eyes that wanted to speak and didn't dare, eyes that went wild with panic when he looked past her shoulder, where the jasmine scent still lingered. Darcy shakes her head. Not my business. She has Nell to protect. She has a job to keep. She can't get tangled up in anything that doesn't belong to her, but those brown eyes keep staring at her from inside her memory, refusing to let go. 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The Blackwood estate has turned into a different world. Darcy stands behind the service door, open just enough to leave a thin crack, and looks out into the grand hall. She's never seen anything like it in her life. 300 guests sit in rows of white silk-covered chairs, arranged in 2 long lines along an aisle scattered with fresh rose petals. Crystal chandeliers hang from a ceiling 10 meters high, pouring down warm golden light that makes everything beneath it shimmer, as if the air itself has been gilded. Fresh flowers pile into an arch at the end of the aisle, white and pale blue, so many that Darcy can smell their sweetness pushing through the crack in the door. A 12-piece band plays a slow love song, the violins leading, soft and ceremonial. Then the great doors open. Genevieve Ashford steps in. The entire hall goes quiet for one beat, and then breaks into a low wave of admiring whispers. Genevieve wears a white wedding dress, not an ordinary white, but a kind of radiant white, studded with thousands of tiny crystals so that every step she takes spills a glittering light, as if she's walking inside moonshine. Her veil is thin as mist. Her blonde hair is swept up, exposing a long, elegant neck adorned with a diamond necklace. She's beautiful, beautiful enough that Darcy feels her chest tighten. Not with admiration, but with something else. Something she can't yet name, like looking at the calm surface of a deep lake and knowing there's something underneath you're not supposed to touch. At the end of the aisle, Sterling Blackwood waits. He's in a black 3-piece suit, spine straight, shoulders broad. The sharp face that's usually cold as marble softened now. His eyes are wet. The most powerful crime boss in the city is crying with happiness as he watches the bride walk toward him, and Darcy thinks that's the most frightening thing she's seen all day, because it means he believes. He believes in that woman completely. Genevieve reaches Sterling, takes his hand, and when she lifts her face to him, with those blue eyes shining with love, Darcy sees 300 people in the room hold their breath at once. Perfect. Everything is perfect. Champagne keeps pouring. Laughter rises from every corner. The smell of exquisite food mixed with expensive perfume forms a thick wall of fragrance. Black tuxedos, glittering evening gowns, polished leather shoes, all moving over the marble floor the elite assembly stepped upon. The same floor Darcy knelt to scrub this morning. She watches it all through that narrow crack and feels as if she's staring into another world through bulletproof glass, a world she's allowed to clean but never allowed to enter. Then, without knowing why, Darcy's eyes drift to the very first row, the family row. She counts. Sterling's chair is empty because he's standing. The 2 witnesses, the seats for the people closest to them, and an empty space, the gap where Arlo's small chair used to be. The chair Darcy dusted a few days ago when she was cleaning the ballroom. Now it's gone. Arlo's bedroom lamp was still on this morning, and the bed had no crease of sleep. The chair was removed, and the panicked brown eyes on the staircase this morning. Darcy closes the service door. She turns away and hurries toward the kitchen. Not my business. She has Nell to worry about. Nell is waiting in the laundry room. That's her business. Only that. 2 hours after the ceremony, right as the reception is reaching its peak, Darcy slips away to check on Nell. She moves fast down the service corridor, threading past 2 staff members carrying trays, turns left, and reaches the laundry room. She pushes the door open. The room is empty. The coloring book lies open face down on the tiled floor. The box of crayons is tipped over, a few sticks scattered and rolling. The worn teddy bear is in the corner by the wall, its black button eyes staring up at the ceiling. But Nell isn't there. Darcy stands frozen for 1 second, then 2, her brain refusing to process what she's seeing. And then the fear hits. Not slowly, but all at once, like someone dumped a bucket of ice water over her head. Nell isn't here. Her 4-year-old, alone in a house full of 300 strangers. And if anyone sees her, if Pemberton sees her, if a guest sees her, mother and daughter will be on the street tonight. But that still isn't the biggest fear. The biggest fear is a mother's instinct, that primitive instinct that doesn't need a reason or logic, the instinct screaming in her head that her child is somewhere she can't see, and every second that passes is a second too long. Darcy runs. She runs through the kitchen, and Opal looks up, but Darcy doesn't stop. She runs through the storage room, the ironing room, the small supply closet in the back. Nothing. She runs up the service stairs, checks the west hallway on the 2nd floor. Nothing. Her heart is pounding so hard she can hear it in her ears, pounding in time with her footsteps on the stone floor. She turns into the east corridor, the private section no staff ever goes near, where the light is dim and large oil paintings of jungle landscapes and stormy seas hang on the walls. And she sees Nell. The little girl is sitting flat on the floor in the middle of the hallway, her back to Darcy. Her tiny legs are stretched out on the carpet. Her head is tilted to one side, her right cheek pressed against the wall, one hand patting at the old patterned wallpaper. Darcy wants to scream with relief, but she swallows it, rushes over, and drops to her knees beside her. Nell, I told you to stay put. Why did you come out here? Do you have any idea how scared you made me? Darcy's voice shakes, half angry, half on the edge of tears. Nell turns to look at her mother. Her eyes are wide, not with fear, but with curiosity. The pure curiosity of a 4-year-old who's found something grown-ups can't see. Mom, Nell whispers. The wall is talking, the wall is crying, and that is the moment everything begins to change. Darcy is about to scoop Nell up and run straight back to the laundry room. That's her first reflex. The reflex of a survivor. The reflex of a mother who's learned that staying out of other people's business is the only way to keep a roof over her child's head. But then she hears it too. At first she thinks she's imagining it. The music from the grand hall reaches this place as nothing but a muffled, heavy bass, like the heartbeat of some enormous sleeping beast. In the brief pause between 2 bass beats, she hears it. Not rats, not pipes, scratching, soft, slow, steady, like fingernails dragged across brick. Then another sound, far weaker than the scratching, thin as a hair, but unmistakably a human voice. A child's voice. Darcy drops to her knees and presses her ear to the wall, exactly where Nell had pressed her cheek. The rough wallpaper scrapes against her skin. She holds her breath. Someone, please. The voice is dry, cracked, like old paper being crushed. Darcy stops breathing. Her heart skips 1 beat, then comes back twice as hard. Her eyes drop to the base of the wall where the wooden trim meets the stone floor. In the dim hallway light, she sees it, a small panel, no bigger than one of Nell's picture books, painted the same color as the wall. If she hadn't been kneeling this close to the floor, she never would have noticed. The panel sits slightly off. The bottom edge juts out a few millimeters, just enough for fingers to hook under. Darcy looks at Nell. Her daughter sits beside her, eyes wide, not understanding what's happening but knowing her mother is scared, because children always know when their mothers are afraid. You sit right here, Darcy says, her voice steadier than she feels. Don't move. She slides her fingers beneath the edge of the panel. Her hand shakes. She pulls. The wood sticks, sealed by old paint, and then it pops free with a soft snap. Behind it is darkness. A rush of cold, damp air spills out, carrying dust and mildew, and something else, sour and sharp, The stink of sweat trapped too long in a sealed space, the smell of dried urine, the smell of fear. Darcy leans in and looks. She can't see anything, only thick blackness. She reaches inside, slowly. Her fingertips catch a web first, then rough brick, and then something soft, warm, alive, human skin. Darcy almost jerks her hand back on instinct, but she doesn't, because what she's touching is an arm. Small, thin, soaked in cold sweat. It trembles under her fingers, not from cold but from exhaustion, the trembling of a body that has reached its final edge. "Arlo," Darcy whispers, her voice catching in her throat. A breath escapes from the darkness. Then the voice, so dry it's barely a voice at all, more like dead leaves rubbing together than a child speaking. "Water, please." She locked me in. Darcy pulls her hand out. She looks at her palm in the faint hallway light. Her fingers are coated with white plaster dust, gray brick grit, and something else. Darker, slightly sticky, partly dried but still wet at the edges. Blood. Not hers. Blood from small fingers that have been scraping the wall for hours. Scraping until nails split, until skin tore. Scraping in desperation, because there was no other way to call for help except to scratch and scratch and scratch, until he made a tiny opening that Nell happened to hear a cry slip through. "Mom." Nell's voice trembles behind her. Darcy turns. Nell is staring at her mother's hand, eyes wide, face drained white. Why is there blood in the wall? Darcy pulls Nell into her arms and holds her tight, shielding her daughter's eyes from the blood on her hand. She holds her little girl and looks into the darkness behind the panel, where a 6-year-old child is curled between 2 brick walls, and everything in her mind locks into place at once, like broken shards of glass snapping into a picture. The empty chair in the front row at the ceremony. Arlo's bedroom lamp still on last night, but the bed with no crease of sleep. Opal's words in the kitchen. She hates that boy. Looks at him like a cockroach. Arlo's eyes on the back stairs this morning, wanting to speak and not daring to. Wild with panic when he looked past Darcy's shoulder, where the jasmine perfume still lingered. The private car that was supposed to take Arlo to Connecticut at dawn. But Arlo didn't go to Connecticut. Arlo is here. Inside this wall, less than 20 steps from 300 guests who are laughing and dancing and raising their glasses. And that child is dying. Darcy has barely pushed the panel back into place, her fingers trembling so violently she can't fit it flush, when she hears that sound. Heels. Slow. Steady. A cold, sharp rhythm on the marble floor at the far end of the corridor, each step landing like a countdown. She knows those heels. The whole estate does. Darcy jolts to her feet and pulls Nell behind her. She tries to hide her right hand, the hand coated in plaster dust and blood, behind her back. But she can't wipe it clean in time. Genevieve Ashford is standing at the end of the hallway, 10 steps away. The bride is still in her spotless white gown, crystals catching the light, but the veil is gone. In her right hand she holds a glass of champagne, long fingers curled around the stem as if it were the neck of a bird. Her left hand rests along the side of her dress, loose, confident. She isn't in a hurry. She walks toward Darcy with the unhurried ease of someone who knows she controls everything in the room. The hallway light shines from behind Genevieve, turning her into a bright figure rimmed in gold, almost angelic. But her eyes aren't an angel's eyes. Those blue eyes sweep from Darcy down to Nell, from Nell to the wall, from the wall to the panel that isn't quite closed, and then back to the hand Darcy is trying to hide behind her back. It takes 2 seconds. 2 seconds, and Genevieve has seen everything. Darcy. Right. Genevieve's voice is gentle, sweet, the kind of sweetness that coats a pill that's poison inside. The new housekeeper. What are you doing in this area? This is the private wing. Darcy swallows. Her throat is dry and rigid. The little one ran out here, she says, forcing calm into her voice, though the tremor at the end of every word gives her away. I'm taking her back to the laundry room. I'm sorry for the disturbance. She grabs Nell's hand and starts to move, trying to slip past Genevieve toward the main corridor. But Genevieve doesn't budge. She stands in the way, champagne still in her hand, the smile still on her mouth. Then she bends down. Genevieve lowers herself to Nell's eye level, slow, her wedding skirt spreading on the marble like a spill of white milk. She looks at Nell. Nell shrinks back, hiding tighter behind her mother's leg, tiny hands gripping Darcy's pant leg. Such a pretty little girl, Genevieve says, her voice light as a breeze. She reaches out, long fingers, nails painted a deep red, and touches Nell's cheek. Nell flinches and turns her face away. Genevieve doesn't pull her hand back. Her finger glides down to Nell's chin, gentle but deliberate, the touch of someone measuring something fragile. Only 4, is she? So small, so delicate. Darcy wants to knock Genevieve's hand away, but she doesn't dare. She stands there with every muscle in her body pulled tight, staring at that red polished finger on her daughter's face, feeling a primal fear. The fear prey feels when the hunter touches it before the strike. Genevieve straightens. The smile disappears. Her face goes flat as a frozen lake, beautiful and completely without emotion. "I know everything about you, Darcy," Genevieve says, her voice dropping low enough that only the two of them can hear. "I know where you came from. I know you don't have family. You don't have money. You don't have anything except that black uniform and the little girl hiding behind your leg. I know your ex-husband, Craig, right? He's suing for custody. The reason in the court file is that you're unstable. You don't have a permanent home. You don't have enough income to support a child." Darcy feels the floor tilt beneath her. Genevieve knows Craig's name, knows the case, knows every detail. "This job," Genevieve continues, her fingers idly turning the stem of her champagne glass, "is the only thing keeping Nell with you. Without this job, you don't have an address. Without an address, you don't have grounds to keep custody." Craig wins. Nell goes back to Craig. She tilts her head, studying Darcy the way you study a mouse once the trap has snapped shut. "If you open your mouth and say anything at all, I won't just fire you. I'll call Craig's lawyer. I'll say you let your 4-year-old daughter wander through a stranger's house in the middle of the night, that you're mentally unstable, that you're not fit to be a mother. You'll lose Nell. Not maybe. Certainly." Genevieve takes one slow step back. The smile returns, sweet and easy, as if what just happened was nothing more than 2 women chatting in a hallway. She lifts her champagne and takes a small sip. "You're smart, Darcy. I can see it in your eyes. Smart people know when to stay quiet." Genevieve turns away, her gown turning softly across the floor, crystals chiming with a bright shimmer. She walks off, heels tapping that same steady beat, the cloying scent of jasmine hanging in her wake like a warning. She doesn't look back. She doesn't need to. She knows the threat has landed exactly where it was meant to land. Darcy stands there with Nell hidden behind her leg, in the dim hallway, listening to the heels fade into the distance, and she feels everything inside her collapsing, slowly, like a building with its foundation pulled out from under it. When the last sound of those heels finally disappears, Darcy collapses. Not sits, but goes down. Her legs no longer able to hold her, her back sliding along the wall until she ends up on the cold stone floor. Nell immediately crawls into her mother's lap, tiny arms wrapping around Darcy's neck, her face pressed into her chest. The little girl is shaking. Darcy is shaking too. Mother and daughter sit on the dark hallway floor, trembling in the same rhythm, and Darcy thinks this is the moment she has to calculate, not with feelings, but with the bare, cold, ruthless truth, as merciless as this house itself. If she opens her mouth, Genevieve fires her. No job means no address. No address means Craig wins in court. Craig takes Nell. Darcy knows Craig. She knows him better than anyone in the world. He doesn't love Nell. He never loved Nell. He wants Nell because Nell is the only thing left he can use to control Darcy. He'll take the child, and the child will grow up in the house where Darcy was shoved into walls, where her wrist was twisted, where she was locked in the bathroom for 3 days without food. Nell will live the life Darcy had to run from. That's the price of speaking. But if she stays silent, Arlo dies, 6 years old, dies in the dark between 2 brick walls, only a few steps away from 300 people, and no one knows. He'll die of thirst, die of suffocation, die of fear, die with his small hands scraped bloody, and no one holding them. Darcy will go back to the laundry room, hold Nell, and listen to the wedding music drifting through, knowing that on the other side of the wall a child is fading like a candle burning down to the wick, and she chose to look away. Darcy closes her eyes. The darkness behind her lids is no different from the darkness inside the wall where Arlo is lying. And in that darkness she sees Grandpa Hank's face. He's sitting on the porch of the old house, the rocking chair creaking, a cup of black coffee in his hand, eyes fixed on the fields beyond. He tells her about war, not the heroic stories, but the ones he never told anyone else, about the times he was so scared he wanted to throw up, The times he wanted to run. The times he stayed not because he was brave, but because he couldn't live with himself if he left. There are moments when doing the right thing will take everything from you, Grandpa Hank says, his voice rough as sandpaper. But if you don't do it, you lose the most important thing. You lose yourself, and no one can ever give that back. Darcy opens her eyes. Nell is looking up at her, big round eyes wet, filled with absolute trust. The child knows nothing. She only knows her mother is holding her, and the world is frightening, but her mother will keep her safe. Darcy looks at her daughter and thinks, if it were Nell locked inside that wall, if it were Nell lying in the dark with blood on her hands and no one coming, what would she want? She would want someone to save her child. Anyone, even if that person had to pay a terrible price. And if Darcy knows and stays silent, if she lets Arlo die and then looks into Nell's eyes every day after, what kind of mother will she be? What will she be teaching her child? That a human life has a price, that your own safety matters more than a child's life, that looking away is how you survive. Darcy wipes her eyes with the back of her hand, the same hand still dusted with plaster and streaked with Arlo's blood. She draws a long breath. She's going to save Arlo, but she can't run into the reception screaming like a madwoman. Genevieve has traps already set, has already planted the story that Darcy is unstable. If Darcy charges into the grand hall shouting and no one believes her, she'll lose everything and Arlo will still die. She has to be smarter than that. She has to find a way to reach Sterling Blackwood. But first, Arlo needs water. The boy is dying of thirst. Everything else has to wait. Darcy stands up. Her legs are still trembling, but she's upright. She lifts Nell into her arms, kisses her forehead, and starts to walk. Darcy steps into the kitchen with Nell in her arms, and a face Opal only has to look at for a single second to know something is wrong. The head cook is chopping onions for the third appetizer of the night, and the big knife pauses mid-cut when Darcy sets Nell down on the stool beside the stove. "Miss Opal, I need you to watch Nell for me," Darcy says, her voice calmer than what she feels inside. She's scared of the loud music. "I have to go finish a few things." Opal looks at Darcy, looks at her hand that Darcy has hurriedly wiped on her uniform but still has white streaks caught between the fingers, looks at her eyes swollen and wet. Opal doesn't ask. She only nods, sets the knife down, takes a cookie from a tin on the shelf, and hands it to Nell. "Miss Opal has a cookie, sweetheart. Sit here with me. Be good." Nell takes the cookie and looks at her mother, her lower lip starting to pout like she might cry. Darcy bends down and kisses her forehead. "I'll be right back. Eat your cookie." She turns away before Nell can grab for her, and she walks quickly out of the kitchen. She takes a bottle of water from the staff supply crate in the break room and shoves it against her lower belly beneath her uniform shirt. The cold plastic presses against her skin and makes her flinch, but she doesn't stop. She needs a straw. The opening in the wall is too small. The bottle can't fit through. She remembers the bar at the entrance to the grand hall has a jar of clear plastic straws. She heads that way, chin down, moving fast but not running, because running would draw eyes. The bar is packed. Guests are lined up waiting for cocktails, laughing loud. Darcy slips behind the counter where two bartenders are spinning in constant motion. She spots the straw jar on the bar top, right beside the ice bucket. She waits for the exact moment both bartenders turn their backs, reaches out, pinches 3 straws, and tucks them into her apron pocket. No one sees. She turns, threads through the crowd, her heart pounding so hard she thinks people might hear it. She makes it back to the east corridor. Dark, silent. The music from the reception is only a dull bass thudding through the walls. She drops to her knees in front of the panel and pulls it free. That sour, sharp air rushes into her face again. "Arlo," she whispers. "I'm back. I brought water." No answer. Darcy's chest tightens. She reaches in, her fingers searching through the darkness, brushing brick, dust, and then the small arm, still warm, still trembling. "Arlo, I have water. Can you hear me?" A small moan, weaker than before. "Water, please." Darcy pulls her hand out and takes the bottle and 2 straws. She looks at the opening, looks at the bottle. The bottle won't fit. The hole is too small, only wide enough for her arm. She has to get water in through a straw, but 1 straw is too short. It won't reach where Arlo is lying. Darcy takes 2 straws, bites the end of the first one flat, pushes it into the end of the second, and makes 1 straw twice as long. Her hands are shaking so badly the straws slip and fall apart. She picks them up and connects them again. They come apart again. She clenches her teeth, uses both hands, grips harder, forces them together. This time they hold. She slides the long straw into the opening and pushes it slowly into the darkness, feeling the tip-tap brick, then touch something soft. Can you see the straw? It's right in front of you. Silence. Then a rustle. Fabric scraping against brick, like Arlo is trying to turn his body in a space so tight he can't sit up. I have it. His voice shakes, every word sounding snapped in half. Darcy twists the cap off the bottle, places the outer end of the straw into the bottle opening, and tilts it. Water runs down the straw, but it doesn't reach Arlo. The straw is too long, and the water leaks out at the joint where the two straws connect. Darcy wants to scream. With an unsteady grip, she yanks the straw back out, squeezes the connection tighter, and adds another seal by twisting the plastic edge. She feeds it back in, tilts the bottle. This time less spills, but it still seeps at the joint, soaking her fingers. She raises the bottle higher. "Drink," she whispers. "Drink, Arlo." And then she hears it, the sound of drinking. Not normal drinking. It's desperate suction. Fast and frantic. The sound of a 6-year-old who hasn't had a single drop of water in his body for who knows how many hours. The sound breaking because he's drinking and crying at the same time. Crying and choking, then sucking again. Reckless, as if the straw will disappear if he stops even for 1 second. Darcy kneels there with both hands holding the bottle and the straw, tears streaming down her face without her permission. She doesn't wipe them away. She doesn't move. She only holds steady, keeps the water flowing as evenly as she can, while the frantic drinking continues from the darkness. On and on. Every swallow like a breath the boy is stealing back from death. It's the most terrible and the most beautiful sound Darcy has ever heard in her life. The bottle grows lighter. The drinking slows, shifting from desperation into exhaustion, and then stops entirely. A long, trembling breath drifts out of the darkness. "Thank you," Arlo whispers. His voice is still dry, but something has returned to it. A small, fragile spark, like light slipping through a crack in a dark room. Darcy wipes her eyes with her sleeve, draws in a breath, and says, "Arlo, tell me, who did this to you?" Arlo is silent for a long time after that question, long enough that Darcy's terrified he's passed out. She presses her ear to the opening and listens to the faint, broken breaths, like the breathing of a baby bird that's fallen from its nest. Then the boy begins to talk. Arlo's voice is slow and weak, each sentence separated by a long stretch of silence, as if he has to gather every last scrap of strength to push each word out of his throat. "That day, I was playing in the backyard, near the garage. I was chasing Miss Opal's cat, and it ran behind the garage. He stops to breathe. I ran after it. And then I heard voices. Inside the garage, the door was cracked open. Darcy stays on her knees, still holding the bottle that's nearly empty, staring into the darkness. I looked in. I saw her and Pike." Darcy closes her eyes. Pike Connolly, Sterling Blackwood's private driver. 30 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, square-jawed, the kind of man Darcy has seen standing beside the glossy black car out front, opening the door for Sterling every morning. She's never spoken to him. He looked at her once and looked away. The look of someone who measures you and decides you don't matter. "They were kissing," Arlo says, his tone flat, like he's telling a story that happened to someone else. She was holding him. He was holding her. I was in the doorway. I was watching, and I didn't understand why she was kissing him because she was going to marry Dad. Silence. The music from the grand hall throbs through the walls, dull and heavy, like the heartbeat of a house with no conscience. Then I heard her say, Arlo continues, his voice weaker. She told Pike, after she married Dad, everything would belong to them. All of it. The money, the house, everything. He swallows, the sound dry and harsh through the opening. She said, Dad would have an accident. Not right away. They had to wait. A year. Maybe more. So no one would suspect. And after that, Pike would replace Dad. They'd have everything. Darcy feels her stomach tighten. Not with nausea, but with something deeper. Something like looking over the edge of a cliff and realizing it drops farther than she ever imagined. This isn't just a child being hidden. This is a murder plot. I was scared, Arlo says, but I was mad. Dad said he loved her. Dad said she'd be my new mom, but she was kissing someone else. and talking about killing Dad. I ran out. I ran back to the house. I said I was going to tell Dad everything. I yelled. I said Dad would cancel the wedding. He goes quiet. When he speaks again, his voice is different. Smaller. More shattered. Like the voice of a child who's learned the world isn't safe. She ran after me. She was fast. I ran into the house, up the stairs, into my room. I thought I could lock the door, but she pushed it open. She was strong. I didn't know she was that strong. She grabbed my hand and dragged me into the closet. Darcy hears a faint rustle, like Arlo is trying to shift his body in the cramped space. In the closet, there's a panel in the back. It covered old pipes. She pulled the panel off. Behind it was this. The space between two walls. Dark. Tight. I couldn't stand. I couldn't sit. I could only lie down. His voice starts to shake. She shoved me in. I tried to hold on to the edge of the closet, but she peeled my fingers off. One by one. I cried. I begged. She didn't say anything. Her face. There was nothing on her face. Like she was taking out the trash. Darcy bites her lip until she tastes blood. She put the panel back. Then I heard the screw gun. Arlo pauses. His breathing grows faster, shallower. Burt, 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 burt. 6 times. I counted. 6 screws. Then silence. I hit the board with my hands. I screamed. I screamed until my voice was gone. No one heard. Then she said, Arlo whispers, through the panel. She said I was a bad kid. She said if I'd been better, it wouldn't be like this. She said. He starts to cry. Not loud crying. Exhausted crying. Dry. With no tears left. She said Dad doesn't love me anymore. She said Dad knows I'm here. And Dad isn't coming. Darcy can't breathe. It feels like someone has set a stone on her chest. She remembers Arlo's eyes on the back stairs that morning. The eyes that wanted to speak and didn't dare. The eyes that flicked past her shoulder toward the jasmine scent. He'd been trying to beg for help with his eyes. And she walked away. Arlo, Darcy says, her voice shaking, but every word carved clear. Listen to me. Your dad doesn't know. Your dad doesn't know you're here. She lied. Your dad loves you, and I'm going to get you out of here. I promise. Silence. Then Arlo's voice, thin as a thread, trembling like a leaf. Do you really promise? I promise. From the darkness, Darcy hears a long exhale. Not the breath of hope, the breath of a child too tired to hope, but still clinging to a stranger's promise because it's the only thing left to hold. Darcy pushes the panel back into place, more carefully this time, pressing it as flush as she can, even though her hands are still shaking. She stands, smooths her apron, wipes her face with her sleeve. She has to get to Sterling Blackwood. She can't break through the wall herself. The boards are screwed tight from inside Arlo's bedroom closet, and that room is locked. She has no tools, no key, no power. The only thing she has is the truth, and she has to put that truth in front of the one person with the authority to act. Darcy steps out of the east corridor and turns toward the grand hall. The music grows louder with every step. The bass vibrates through the floor. The brass blares. Laughter and clinking glasses blend into a thick wall of sound. She pushes through the service door, and the golden light from the hall hits her eyes like a slap. A sea of powerful faces are dancing and drinking, and living inside a world she doesn't belong to. Darcy searches through the sea of people. The head table is at the far end on a raised platform. Sterling is sitting there, one arm draped over the back of his chair, talking to a silver-haired man in a dark blue suit. Genevieve isn't beside him. She's probably somewhere in the crowd. This is her chance. Darcy steps out from the service door, slips along the edge of the hall, keeps close to the line of stone columns, moving toward the head table. 10 steps. 15. 20. The head table is closer now. She can see Sterling's face clearly. The hard angles, the chandelier light catching in his dark hair, slightly grayed at the temples. 25 steps. Then a hand clamps onto her shoulder, solid, stopping her cold. Where do you think you're going? Pemberton is in front of her, back straight, face dry as ebony. She has no idea where he came from, as if he can smell a staff member stepping out of place the way a hunting dog smells a rabbit. I need to speak to Mr. Blackwood, Darcy says. She tries to keep her voice steady, but she hears the urgency leaking through every word. It's extremely urgent. Please, just 1 minute. Pemberton looks at her, not into her eyes, but through her, the way you look at something not worth focusing on. Staff do not enter guest areas, he says, flat as a posted rule. That's the rule. You know the rule. Mr. Pemberton, please listen to me. This is serious. It involves Mr. Blackwood's son. I need to. You need to go back to the kitchen. Pemberton cuts in. His eyes narrow, not with suspicion but with irritation. The irritation of someone spotting an ant on a dining table in the middle of a banquet. Mr. Blackwood's son is in Connecticut. Who do you think you are, demanding to see Mr. Blackwood in the middle of his wedding? You're a housekeeper. You scrub floors. You don't have anything urgent enough to disturb the master on the most important night of his life. Darcy opens her mouth, ready to push, ready to tell him about the wall, about Arlo, about the desperate sound of drinking she just heard. But she looks into Pemberton's eyes and sees another wall, not made of brick or plaster, but made of something far harder. Class. In Pemberton's eyes, Darcy isn't a person. She's furniture. Furniture doesn't have emergencies. Furniture doesn't have a voice. Furniture does its job or it gets replaced. Go back to the kitchen. Now, Pemberton says, his voice dropping lower, heavier. If I see you in the guest area again, you won't have to wait until morning. You'll be on the street tonight. He turns and walks away, his black suit melting into the crowd within seconds. Darcy stands there alone at the edge of the party, surrounded by music and laughter, and she feels more like a ghost than she ever has in her life. She looks toward the head table. Sterling Blackwood is 30 steps away. 30 steps. Close enough that she can see the brand new wedding ring shining on his left hand. But those 30 steps might as well be 30 miles, because between her and him are 300 guests, a butler who can throw her out onto the street, and a system where a housekeeper doesn't get to speak to the man who owns the house, even if his son is dying less than 20 steps away. Darcy turns back toward the kitchen, her heart still hammering, her head spinning as she searches for another way. If she can't reach Sterling on her own legs, then she'll use someone else's. She grabs a sheet of paper from the kitchen's order notebook, the pale yellow kind with ruled lines, and a ballpoint pen. A visible quiver in her hands made the letters come out crooked, like a child's handwriting. But she doesn't care. It only has to be readable. She writes, Mr. Blackwood, your son, Arlo, isn't in Connecticut. He's locked inside the wall in the east hallway on the second floor. He's dying. Please come immediately. Darcy Holloway, house staff. She folds the paper into quarters and writes on the outside, to Mr. Sterling Blackwood. Urgent. Private. She looks around the kitchen. Servers are moving in and out nonstop, carrying trays of food and wine. She recognizes one of them, a young man named Wyatt. Only 2 weeks on the job. Tall and skinny. Acne across his face. Always clumsy, but the only one who's ever smiled at Darcy when she was scrubbing the kitchen floor. She stops Wyatt at the kitchen door as he's carrying a tray of champagne out to the hall. Wyatt, Darcy says, low and fast. I need you to do something for me. Give this note to Mr. Blackwood. Put it on the table in front of him. Don't give it to anyone else. Only Mr. Blackwood. Can you do that? Wyatt looks at the note, looks at Darcy, frowns. What is this? I can't explain right now, but it's important. Please. Maybe it's because Darcy's voice sounds too desperate. Maybe it's because he's just a 20-year-old kid who hasn't learned fear yet. But Wyatt nods. He slips the note into his vest pocket, lifts the champagne tray, and walks into the reception. Darcy stays by the kitchen door, watching through the crack as Wyatt moves through the crowd. He weaves between tables, serving champagne, inching closer to the head table. 20 steps. 15. 10. Wyatt sets the champagne tray on a side table beside the head table, his right hand reaching into his vest pocket. And then Darcy sees her. Genevieve appears from nowhere, like a ghost in a white dress. She places a hand on Wyatt's arm, light and friendly, her smile bright. She says something into his ear. Wyatt goes still, his face flushing, the face of a young man with a beautiful woman whispering in his ear. Then Darcy sees Genevieve extend her hand, and Wyatt, as if hypnotized, pulls the folded note from his pocket and places it into her palm. Darcy wants to scream, but her voice jams in her throat. She watches Genevieve take the note, open it, read. Her expression doesn't change. No shock, no paling, no reaction at all. She only reads, folds it, and tears it. She tears it slowly, calmly, the pale yellow paper split in half, then into 4, then into 8 small pieces, Genevieve drops the scraps into an empty champagne glass on Wyatt's tray, gentle as placing flower petals into water. Then she looks toward the kitchen door. Straight at Darcy. Through 300 people. Through music. Through light. Those blue eyes find Darcy as precisely as an arrow finding its target. And she smiles. A small smile, a slight lift at the corner of her mouth, the kind of smile only two people understand. The kind of smile that says, "I told you." Genevieve turns away. She walks straight to Pemberton, who's standing near a stone column at the edge of the hall. She leans in close, her hand lightly on his arm, whispering. Darcy can't hear a word from this distance, but she sees Pemberton's face change. His eyes narrow, not with the irritation he had before, but with something far worse. Suspicion, concern, the look of a man being warned about a threat. Pemberton looks toward the kitchen door, looks at Darcy. His gaze is no longer the gaze he gives furniture. It's the gaze you give a problem, a nuisance that needs to be handled. The gaze you give someone you've been told is unstable. Darcy knows instantly. Genevieve has told Pemberton she's crazy. 5 minutes later, Pemberton steps into the kitchen. He walks straight to Darcy. No detours, no politeness. "Darcy Holloway," he says, his voice low but hard as steel. "Mrs. Blackwood has informed me that you've shown concerning behavior tonight. You wrote a note to Mr. Blackwood with nonsensical content. You wandered into restricted areas. You left your child unattended in the laundry room." Each sentence lands like a brick, building a wall around Darcy. "Mrs. Blackwood says you have a history of mental instability, that this is why your ex-husband is suing for custody." Darcy opens her mouth. "Mr. Pemberton, that's not true. I don't want to hear it." Pemberton cuts in, one hand raised. "I warned you twice. This is your final warning. If you cause trouble one more time, even once, I won't fire you. I'll have security escort you and the child off this property, and I'll call the police if I have to." He turns and walks away, leaving Darcy standing in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by the clatter of pots and the heat of the stoves. Opal watches from the corner, her hand paused on the wooden ladle, her eyes full of worry, but she doesn't dare ask. Darcy looks down at her 2 hands, both still marked with white dust between the fingers no matter how hard she tried to wipe it away. Every indirect root is dead. Pemberton doesn't believe her. Wyatt has been neutralized by Genevieve. The note has become scraps floating in a champagne glass, and now she isn't just an invisible housekeeper. She's a crazy housekeeper. Unstable. The kind of housekeeper who'll be dragged out of this house by security if she opens her mouth one more time. While Arlo lies in the dark, counting breaths, waiting on a promise Darcy no longer knows how to keep. Darcy stands in the middle of the kitchen, pots and pans clattering all around her, heat from the stoves washing over her face, but she can't hear anything, can't feel anything. She's sinking into a sea of desperation with no bottom, no shore, no life raft. She tried to go straight to Sterling and she was blocked. She tried to send a note and it was torn up. She was turned into a madwoman in Pemberton's eyes. Every door slammed shut. Every path ended in a dead end. And Arlo is still lying in the dark, counting each breath, clinging to a promise Darcy no longer knows how to keep. Then she hears Nell's voice. "Mom." Darcy turns. Nell is sitting on the stool by the stove, legs swinging, cookie crumbs stuck to her face from what Opal gave her. The little girl looks at her mother with big, clear eyes, knowing nothing about the wall, the blood, Genevieve, the ruthless calculations ripping through her mother's mind. "Mom," Nell says again, tilting her head. "Is the wall done crying?" Darcy stands there. That question flies across the noisy kitchen, flies over the chopping knives, the boiling water, the staff shouting to each other, and sinks straight into the center of her chest like a blade. "Is the wall done crying?" 4 words, from the mouth of a 4-year-old who understands nothing. But those 4 words rip apart every calculation, every careful weighing, every cold equation between keeping Nell and saving Arlo, because the answer is no, the wall isn't done crying. Arlo is still in there. And if Darcy does nothing, the wall will stop crying not because Arlo is rescued, but because Arlo won't have the strength to cry anymore. Darcy walks to Nell. She kneels down to her daughter's eye level and places both hands on her small shoulders. She looks into Nell's eyes exactly like hers, warm brown, trusting, completely unafraid because Mom is here. "Nell, listen to me," Darcy says, and her voice is strangely calm, calmer than it's been at any point tonight. I have to go do something. You stay here with Miss Opal. Be good. Eat your cookie. And no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, remember one thing. I love you more than anything in the world. Do you understand? Nell nods, not really understanding, but she feels something in her mother's voice, something heavy and final, so she doesn't ask anything else. She only reaches up, wraps her arms around Darcy's neck, presses her face into her shoulder, and says, I remember. Darcy kisses Nell's forehead and breathes in the scent of her hair. The smell of milk and cookies, the only smell in the world that makes her feel like everything is worth it. Then she stands. Opal is by the stove, wooden ladle in her hand, watching Darcy. She's seen the whole thing. She didn't hear Nell's question, but she can read Darcy's face, can read that something has shifted in the young woman's eyes, something that has stopped wavering and gone hard as steel. What are you going to do? Opal asks, her voice low. Darcy looks at her. The right thing. Opal doesn't ask more. She only nods, slow and heavy, as if she understands there are moments in life when more questions are pointless, and the only thing left is to let someone go do what they have to do. Darcy walks out of the kitchen. This time she doesn't slip through the service door. She goes straight into the main corridor, heading toward the grand hall. Her footsteps are even and steady, tapping lightly on the stone. She isn't shaking. For the first time tonight, her hands don't shake, her legs don't shake, her voice doesn't shake, because there's nothing left to fear. She's accepted losing everything. Darcy pushes open the grand hall's double doors and walks in, not slipping through the service entrance, not skirting the edges of the wall, not lowering her head to hide in the shadows. She walks straight in, a black uniform in a sea of sequins, flat shoes among hundreds of high heels and polished leather, simple brown hair pulled into a plain ponytail among elaborate curls pinned with jewels. She looks like a drop of black ink spilled onto an oil painting. And she doesn't care. The reception is at its peak. The band is playing a slow waltz, the crystal chandeliers washing everything in warm gold, hundreds of couples swaying on the dance floor or standing around the tables with drinks in hand, laughter ringing as if the outside world doesn't exist. Darcy walks straight toward the head table. Her eyes lock on Sterling Blackwood, seated on the raised platform, one hand holding a glass, the other tapping lightly to the beat on the tabletop. She makes it 10 steps before a server blocks her. His name is Reed, tall and thin, face serious. Darcy, you can't be here. Pemberton will. Darcy brushes his hand aside, not brutal but not gentle either, with the decisive motion of someone who has no time left for politeness. Reed freezes, too surprised to react. Darcy keeps going. 20 steps. A woman in a red gown steps back and nearly bumps into her, looking down with confusion and a flicker of disgust, as if a rat just ran through the middle of the party. Darcy doesn't look at her. 30 steps. She can see Sterling's face clearly now, the wedding ring on his finger flashing under the lights. Just a few more steps. Then Pemberton appears. He charges in from the left, fast enough that his black vest flutters, his face pale with fury. Holloway, he hisses through clenched teeth, striding toward her. I warned you. I'll call security right now. But Pemberton isn't the one who reaches her first. Genevieve is faster. The bride is dancing with some guest when her eyes catch the black uniform cutting through the crowd. Genevieve stops mid-step, says something to her partner, then turns and moves quickly toward Darcy. Fast, but not running. Genevieve never runs. She glides through the room with the grace of someone who knows 300 eyes can be on her at any moment. She reaches Darcy when Darcy is 5 steps from Sterling. 5 steps. Darcy can see Sterling just over Genevieve's shoulder, turning in curiosity at the strange movement of his new wife. 5 steps that might as well be an ocean. Genevieve grabs Darcy's wrist. Hard. Her fingers clamp like iron, pain blooming so sharp Darcy almost cries out. But Genevieve's face is something else entirely. She smiles, warm and gentle, the smile of a gracious hostess speaking kindly to staff. To 300 guests, it looks like a sweet little moment, the beautiful bride showing concern for a housekeeper. No one can see the fingers squeezing Darcy's wrist to bruises. You, Genevieve whispers, her mouth still smiling but her voice a hiss through her teeth, just murdered your life. And that little girl's life. I'll call Craig tonight. I'll call his lawyer. I'll call the court. Nell won't be your daughter anymore by sunrise. Do you understand? Darcy feels the pain. Her wrist hurts. Her chest hurts. Everything hurts. But inside that pain, She looks past Genevieve's shoulder and sees Sterling watching them, frowning, not understanding yet. And she thinks of Arlo, 6 years old, inside the wall, hands slick with blood. She said, "Dad doesn't love me anymore." She thinks of Nell. "Mom, is the wall done crying?" She thinks of Grandpa Hank. "If you don't do the right thing, you lose yourself." Darcy looks Genevieve straight in the eye, blue eyes burning with hatred, the eyes of a killer in a wedding dress. "You locked a child inside a wall to die," Darcy says, her voice shaking, but every word clear. "I'd rather lose everything than let that happen." Genevieve squeezes harder. Darcy doesn't flinch. She doesn't step back. She doesn't lower her gaze. For the first time in her life, Darcy Holloway isn't invisible. She stands in the middle of 300 people, wrist trapped in her enemy's hand, and she holds eye contact. Pemberton reaches them, one hand stretching toward Darcy, his mouth opening to give an order. Security starts moving from the corner of the hall. She has a few seconds. Only a few seconds before she's dragged away, before she's shoved out of this house, before everything ends. Darcy draws a deep breath. Then she rips her hand out of Genevieve's grip, hard enough that the bride stumbles half a step back, and Darcy screams. The scream tears through everything. It isn't the scream of someone angry or panicked. It's the scream of someone who's burned every bridge behind her and accepted there's no way back. "Mr. Blackwood, your son is inside the wall of this house. Arlo isn't in Connecticut. He's dying." Darcy's voice fills the grand hall, slams into the 10-meter ceiling, ricochets off marble walls, cuts through the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, and kills it all. The band stops, not all at once, but one by one, the violin first, then the cello, then the piano, like a fire being stamped out ember by ember, until there's only silence. And that silence is heavier than any sound. 300 people freeze. Wine glasses stop halfway to lips. Hands holding each other on the dance floor fall apart. Every head turns toward Darcy, the woman in a black uniform standing in the middle of the reception, arms hanging at her sides, chest heaving, eyes red, a bruise already blooming on her right wrist where Genevieve had been squeezing. Sterling Blackwood rises from the head table. Slowly, his chair scrapes back across the floor, harsh in the silence. He looks at Darcy, his face unreadable. Genevieve reacts instantly. She steps up beside Sterling, places her hand on his arm, and her expression shifts from shock to concern with perfect precision. Acting so fast, Darcy almost wants to applaud. "Sterling, sweetheart, I'm so sorry," Genevieve says, loud enough for the people nearby to hear, her voice trembling just the right amount, threaded with sadness and pity. "This is Darcy Holloway, the new housekeeper. She has a history of mental instability. Her ex-husband is suing for custody because she isn't capable. I've tried to handle it gently all night, but she's getting worse. Please call security. I'm afraid she could be a danger to the guests." A ripple of murmurs begins to spread through the crowd. Darcy catches pieces of whispering. "Unstable. Poor thing. Get someone." Pemberton steps forward, his face gray, his voice hard. "Mr. Blackwood, I can confirm. This woman has shown strange behavior all evening, wandering restricted areas, writing you notes with nonsensical content, leaving her small child unattended. Mrs. Blackwood informed me, and I warned her 3 times. Darcy can see it happening. She can see the story Genevieve has been weaving all night, closing around her like a perfect trap. This woman didn't just lock Arlo inside a wall. She locked Darcy inside a narrative. The crazy housekeeper. Unstable. Unreliable. Every time Darcy tried, Genevieve turned the attempt into evidence against her. Sterling looks at Darcy. His gaze is cold, assessing, without pity and without cruelty. Only the calculation of a man used to judging people in seconds. "Why should I believe you?" he asks, his voice low. Darcy knows she has one chance, one answer. If she fails, she'll be dragged out and Arlo will die. She raises both hands, not in surrender, to show. Under the bright chandelier light, 300 people see the housekeeper's hands. White plaster dust packed into every crease, under every nail. Gray brick grit smeared across her palms. And blood, dark, dried blood streaked along her fingers, caught beneath her nails, not her own. "This is your son's blood," Darcy says. She isn't screaming now. Her voice is calm, clear, each word dropping into the silence like a stone into a deep well. "Blood from Arlo's fingers," 6 years old, scratching at the wall for hours until his nails split, until his skin tore, scratching because no one could hear him begging for help. Darcy points toward the east hallway. He's inside the wall, the east corridor, second floor, behind a panel near the painting of the forest landscape. She, Darcy points straight at Genevieve, dragged him into the closet in his bedroom, shoved him into the space between two walls, and used a screw gun to drive 6 screws and seal the panel shut. The murmurs swell, no longer whispers but waves. And I know why, Darcy continues. Arlo told me. He saw her and Pike Connolly, your private driver, kissing in the garage. He heard them planning. After the wedding, you'd have an accident. Pike would replace you. They'd have everything. Arlo threatened to tell his father, and that's why she locked him in. The room shudders. 300 people inhale at once. The murmurs turn into noise. Someone drops a glass, the crack of shattering crystal sharp on the marble floor. A woman covers her mouth. A man pushes back from his chair. Sterling Blackwood stands still. His face goes white. His eyes move from Darcy to the dust and blood on her hands, and then to his new wife. Genevieve stands at his side, the smile gone. Her face is flat, but in her blue eyes, for the first time tonight, Darcy sees something fracture. Sterling doesn't speak for 5 seconds. 5 seconds in which the entire hall holds its breath, 300 people frozen like statues, and Darcy feels each second stretch into an hour. Then he turns to Pemberton, his voice clipped, like an order on a battlefield. Call the boarding school in Connecticut, right now. Put it on speaker. Pemberton fumbles his phone out of his inner pocket, fingers trembling as he scrolls for the number. He taps to call, turns on speaker. The ringtone fills the silent reception hall. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4, 5. No one answers. The ringing keeps going, steady and soulless, echoing from the phone in Pemberton's hand, like knocking on the door of an empty room. 6, 7. It rolls into voicemail. A recorded voice, formal English, politely practiced. You have reached Whitmore Academy, Connecticut. We are currently outside business hours. Please call again during regular office hours. Pemberton ends the call and looks at Sterling. Sir, it's quite late. Well outside business hours. There's no one on duty to take the call. And in that instant, Darcy sees Genevieve smile. Not a big smile, just a slight curve at the right corner of her mouth, so quick most people wouldn't catch it. But Darcy catches it, and she knows Sterling catches it too. It's the smile of someone who thinks she's escaped. The victorious flicker a liar can't quite suppress when she believes she's won. Genevieve steps forward, lays a hand on Sterling's arm, her voice gentle but firm. You see, there's nothing. Arlo is in Connecticut, sleeping peacefully. She's crazy, Sterling. She needs help, not attention. Call security, darling. End this. Pemberton looks at Sterling, waiting for the order. 2 security men in black suits start moving from the corner, slow and certain, toward Darcy. Darcy feels the floor dropping out from under her. Everything is collapsing. Exactly as she feared. She gambled everything. Nell, her life, and the final card has just flipped face down. The school didn't answer. No proof. Only her word, a housekeeper, a single mother being sued for custody, a woman the butler has just confirmed is mentally unstable. Against the bride's word, the new wife of the city's crime boss, the most beautiful woman in the room, the woman Sterling loved enough to cry when he watched her walk in. The guards get closer. 5 steps. 3. Darcy closes her eyes. She thinks of Arlo in the darkness. Do you really promise? She promised, and she failed. Stop. Sterling's voice cuts through the air like a blade. The guards freeze. Pemberton freezes. The whole hall freezes. Darcy opens her eyes. Sterling isn't looking at her. He's looking at Genevieve. He looks at his new bride with eyes Darcy has never seen on anyone. Eyes not angry, not sad, not shocked, but eyes reading, analyzing, peeling layer after layer away. The gaze of a man who spent 30 years among liars, killers, and betrayals, and survived by knowing the truth before it's proven. He watches her for a long time. A very long time. He watches her eyes, where that earlier victorious smile still lingers at the corner of her mouth. He watches the hand on his arm, the fingers gripping just a little too tight, the grip of someone clinging, not comforting. He watches the blue eyes trying to stay calm, but not quite hiding something deep inside, something ordinary people would miss. But Sterling Blackwood isn't ordinary. "I've lived my whole life among liars," Sterling says. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. The hall is so silent you could hear candle flames on the tables. "I've sat at tables with men who looked me in the eye and swore loyalty, then stabbed me in the back before the glass was empty. I've watched people die because they trusted the wrong person. And I'm still alive, because I know one thing." He pauses, silence thick as smoke. "I know when someone is telling the truth." He pulls his arm away from Genevieve's hand, not yanking, not shoving, just withdrawing it. Gentle but final. The way you pull back after touching something that no longer belongs to you. Genevieve stands there, her hand left hanging in the air, fingers still curved to the shape of her husband's arm, but with nothing to hold. For the first time tonight, her face can't act. For the first time, it's only empty. Sterling turns to Darcy. He looks at her, the black uniform, the dust and blood on her hands, the bruise on her wrist, the brown eyes swollen red but not crying. "Lead me to him," he says. Darcy walks, and Sterling walks with her. Not trailing behind like a master following a servant, but moving beside her. Long strides, fast, shoulders squared, jaw locked tight. Behind them, the massive crowd spill away from the tables, off the dance floor, away from the bar, like floodwater breaking its banks. Heels hammer on marble in hundreds of simultaneous beats. Silk skirts whisper and scrape. Voices press into rapid whispers. No one wants to miss this. This is no longer a wedding. This is a trial. They turn into the east corridor. The light is weaker here, and the oil paintings of jungles and stormy seas stare down at the moving crowd with silent eyes. Sterling moves ahead, Darcy guiding him. She stops at the forest landscape painting and points to the base of the wall. "Here," she says, "behind this panel." Sterling drops to his knees. A billionaire in a $1,000 wedding suit, kneeling on a dusty floor, both knees on cold stone. He places his hand on the panel Darcy has pulled free twice tonight. He pushes. The panel gives, loose, and a rush of sour, damp air pours out. The smell hits the faces of the 300 people behind them. Someone sneezes. Someone clamps a hand over their nose. Someone whispers, "Oh my God, what is that?" Sterling presses his ear to the opening. The hallway goes so silent you can hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "Arlo," Sterling calls. His voice is rough, breaking at the end. The voice of a man who has never allowed himself to be weak, trying not to shatter. "Son, it's Dad. Are you in there?" Silence. Silence long enough that Darcy feels her stomach drop. She looks at Sterling and watches his face go whiter by the second. Watches his hand on the wall start to shake. Watches the most primal fear of a father squeeze him from the inside out. Then, from the darkness, a groan. Small, so weak it almost isn't sound at all. More like wind slipping through a crack than a human voice. But it is a voice. A child's voice. Dad. Sterling Blackwood, the Mafia boss. The man the whole city fears. The man no one has ever seen shed a tear. Breaks down. Not quietly. He sobs out loud, a sound ripped from deep in his chest. Half roar, half choke. The cry of a father hearing his child call from the far side of a wall where he's been buried alive. "He's in there," Sterling shouts, springing up, eyes wild, turning toward his security. "My son is in there. Get him out. Break into his room. Now, now." 2 guards sprint up the stairs. Pemberton shouts after them. Fire axe, the glass case in the second-floor hallway. Feet thunder on the stone steps. 300 guests surge after, a silent procession moving up to the second floor. Evening gowns dragging on the stairs, dress shoes striking like war drums. They reach Arlo's bedroom. An oak door, brass hinges, locked tight. The first guard raises the fire axe, the steel edge flashing under the hall lights. 1 swing. Wood cracks. 2. The hinges shudder. 3. The lock gives. The door bursts open and slams into the wall inside with a boom that echoes down the floor. Sterling charges in. He doesn't see the room, doesn't see the bed, doesn't see the toys on the shelf. He goes straight to the closet and yanks the doors open. Inside are tiny suits on hangers, little shoes lined up neatly, and at the back of the closet, a pale sheet of plywood screwed tight to the frame with 6 silver screws. 6 screws. Arlo counted right. Sterling stares at the board. He stares at the 6 bright screws in cheap wood, and he understands. He understands everything. Axe, he says, and his voice isn't the voice of a father crying anymore. It's Sterling Blackwood's voice, the voice betrayers hear before everything ends. A guard hands it over. Sterling doesn't wait. He lifts the axe himself, turns it, uses the flat hammer side, and smashes the center of the board. The wood splits. The stench bursts out like a grave cracking open. Sterling drops the axe and jams both hands into the gap, snapping wood, pulling, tearing. Splinters cut his hands. His suit rips at the shoulder, but he doesn't stop. He tears until the opening is big enough, and when the light from the bedroom spills into the dark space, everyone sees. Arlo is curled inside a gap less than 2 feet wide, small as an animal trapped in a box. The blue car pajamas are filthy, stiff with dried sweat and dust. His face is ash gray, lips split and pale, eyes open but not really seeing, stung by the light after too long in darkness. His hands are smeared with dried blood, nails broken, skin torn, fingers swollen. He looks up and blinks, and his mouth moves. A whisper fills the room that's gone so silent it hurts to breathe. Dad. Sterling slides his hands under his son's back, gentle, shaking, like he's lifting a glass baby bird. He pulls Arlo out of the darkness. The boy is terrifyingly light, so light Sterling staggers, because he braced for the weight of a normal 6-year-old. But the child in his arms isn't normal anymore. He folds Arlo to his chest, presses his face into the boy's dirty, dust-caked hair, and cries. Not loud now, just tears falling, shoulders trembling, breath breaking in a man coming apart from the inside. Arlo rests his head on his father's shoulder, eyes unfocused as they drift toward the doorway, where 300 unfamiliar faces stare at him in horror. But Arlo doesn't look at them. He looks past the suits and the gowns, scanning the crowd until his gaze lands on one face. Darcy. She stands at the back of the room, her shoulder against the doorframe, filthy hands clenched tight at her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. She promised. Arlo whispers into his father's shoulder, his voice thin as a thread. She said she'd get me out, and she kept her word. Sterling carries Arlo out of the bedroom, his son curled in his arms like an injured kitten, his head slumped against his father's shoulder, his blood-smeared hands clutching the lapel of Sterling's wedding suit and refusing to let go. The 300 guests part along the hallway on instinct, silent, as if the crowd is a sea splitting in two. No one dares to speak. No one dares to breathe too loudly. They look at the ashen child in the father's arms and they understand they've just witnessed something that will never leave their memory. Sterling goes down the staircase one step at a time, slow and steady, eyes fixed straight ahead. At the bottom of the stairs, Genevieve is standing there. She doesn't run. She doesn't cry. She stands motionless in her white wedding dress, arms hanging at her sides, her face wax pale, like a beautiful statue placed in the wrong room. Sterling stops on the last step, one stair higher than Genevieve. He looks down at his new wife. "Look at my son," he says. He doesn't shout. His voice is low, deep, the kind of voice people who know Sterling Blackwood would tell you is the most dangerous one, the voice he uses before someone disappears. Genevieve doesn't look. Her gaze stays on Sterling's chest, on his lapel, on anything except the child. "Look," a second time. Same voice, but something in those 2 words makes Genevieve flinch like she's been touched by electricity. She lifts her eyes. Her gaze meets Arlo. The ash-gray face, the split, pale lips, the blood-smeared hands gripping his father's suit, the dull brown eyes looking back at her from Sterling's shoulder. Genevieve's face twitches. A small, uncontrollable jerk at the left corner of her mouth. That's all. But it's enough. It shows she sees. She knows exactly what she did, and she doesn't regret it. She only regrets being caught. "Call the police," Sterling says, not looking at anyone in particular. But Pemberton is already pulling out his phone. Charges. Attempted murder of a child. Kidnapping. Conspiracy. Then Sterling drops his voice even lower, only loud enough for the people closest to hear, and find Pike. Pike Connolly. He doesn't leave this property. He doesn't say more. He doesn't say whether Pike will be handed to the police or handed to someone else. He doesn't say whether Pike will go to court or vanish. He only says Pike doesn't leave this property. And the way he says it, flat as black water at night, makes the 2 nearest guards nod and melt into the shadowed hallway without asking a single question. Sterling steps past Genevieve and keeps moving down the hall toward the front doors, calling out for anyone to hear. Call an ambulance. Now. Tell them we have a child in severe dehydration. The first police siren rises in the distance, faint, then louder. Red and blue lights begin to strobe through the tall windows of the grand hall, painting the marble walls with frantic color. 2 police cars stop outside the estate. 4 officers walk in. Gun belts, radios, heavy black shoes on stone. They look rough and real inside this world of silk and glitter. Pemberton points at Genevieve. One officer steps up, pulls handcuffs from his belt. Mrs. Genevieve Ashford Blackwood. Blackwood, Genevieve says automatically, correcting the last name by reflex, like someone who still believes she has the right. The officer doesn't care. He turns her around. Gentle, but without hesitation. Her arms are pulled behind her back. Metal clicks. Click, click. The cuffs lock around her wrists, above the diamond bracelet Sterling gave her 3 months ago. The bride, in her now crumpled silk gown, is handcuffed at her own wedding. The officer starts leading her toward the door. She walks with her spine straight, her chin lifted, her dress dragging across the stone floor, crystals chiming under the red and blue light from the police cars outside. The crowd parts again. No one wants to stand close to her, as if crime is contagious. When she passes where Darcy is standing, Genevieve stops. The officer behind her gives her shoulder a gentle push, but she doesn't move. Not for 1 second. Just long enough to turn her head and look at Darcy. Those blue eyes are no longer cold, no longer flat. They burn. They burn with a dark fire, the fire of pure hatred, undiluted, never going out. "You're just a maid," Genevieve says. Her voice is low, meant only for Darcy. "Who do you think you are?" Darcy doesn't answer. She stands there with her back against a cold stone column, filthy hands clenched at her chest, eyes on Genevieve without blinking, without lowering, without shaking. She doesn't need to answer. The answer is in the child who has been pulled out of the wall, lying in his father's arms, breathing, alive. The officer guides Genevieve forward again. The stained lace sweeps through the front doors, down the outdoor steps, into the flashing red and blue lights, and then disappears behind the police car door. The reception hall falls silent again. 300 guests stand among wilting flowers, dripping candles, spilled champagne, and splintered oak scattered on the staircase. The wedding is over. Then Darcy sees Sterling. He's already handed Arlo over to the paramedics in the ambulance parked outside, but before he climbs in after his son, he stops on the outdoor steps. He pulls his phone from his pocket, dials a number, waits 2 seconds. Someone answers. Sterling says 1 sentence. 1 short sentence. Darcy is too far away to hear it clearly, but Pemberton is closer, and Darcy sees Pemberton's face. The butler's face shifts from gray to chalk white, then from white into something without color at all, the expression of a man who has just heard something he wishes he hadn't. Sterling ends the call, slips the phone back into his pocket, steps into the ambulance, and the doors swing shut. Darcy understands. She doesn't need to hear the exact words to understand. Genevieve Ashford's life won't end in a courtroom. 4 o'clock in the morning. The Blackwood estate is empty. The 300 guests have all left in silence, one after another. No one shaking hands. No one saying goodbye. They just drift past the front doors like ghosts in evening wear, climb into private cars, and vanish into the night. The flowers on the banquet tables are wilting. The candles are out, wax run and hardened into white puddles on the tablecloths. Champagne lies spilled on the marble floor, untouched, and the smell of alcohol mixed with wax and the broken wood from Arlo's bedroom door still hangs in the air. Darcy sits in the kitchen on the metal chair Opal likes to use. Nell is curled in her mother's lap, sleeping hard, one small hand gripping the sleeve of Darcy's uniform, and even in sleep, the child won't let her go. Opal went back to her room long ago, after making Darcy a pot of hot tea and placing a hand on her shoulder without saying a word, because there are moments when silence is the only language big enough to hold everything that needs to be said. Darcy hears footsteps before she sees the man. Heavy footsteps, tired footsteps. Not the footsteps of power she's heard all night. Sterling Blackwood steps into the kitchen. He's changed out of his wedding suit. He's wearing a gray t-shirt and plain slacks. His dark hair is a mess. His eyes are swollen red, deep shadows under them. He looks 10 years older than the man who stood at the end of the aisle this afternoon. He scans the kitchen, sees Darcy, and walks over. He pulls out a metal chair, the kind the cooks sit on between rushes, and sits down across from her. They sit with a steel table between them, a pot of tea gone lukewarm, and a long stretch of silence. "He's going to live," Sterling says. His voice is raw, like he's talked too much tonight, or cried too much, or both. The doctor says severe dehydration, 3 broken fingers from scratching the wall. Severe psychological trauma, but he's going to live. He pauses and swallows. The doctor also said, another half day and they couldn't have saved him. Darcy nods. She wants to say something, but her throat locks, so she only nods. Sterling looks at her. Then he looks down at Nell sleeping in her lap, at the tiny hand clutching Darcy's sleeve. He looks for a long time. A very long time, and Darcy sees something shift on his face, something softening, cracking, then quietly settling into a new shape. She understands why. Because Arlo gripped his lapel the same way, the same kind of grip, the same reflex, fingers curled tight into the cloth of the person the child trusts most in the world, even in sleep, even unconscious, refusing to let go. 2 different children, 2 different lives, but the same way of holding on to their parent. "She threatened you," Sterling says. Not a question, a statement, Darcy tells him. Tells him about the threat of losing her job, losing Nell, about Craig, about lawyers, about custody. She tells it in a level voice, not crying, not shaking, because she's already cried enough and now there's only bare truth left. Sterling listens. His face doesn't change, but Darcy sees his jaw tighten, slow, the tightening of a man forcing something enormous down inside himself, something far more dangerous than ordinary anger. "You knew you'd lose your daughter," Sterling says slowly, each word heavy as stone, "and you still did it." Darcy looks at Nell, at the soft hair, the small hand gripping her sleeve, the tiny nose rising and falling in steady sleep. "Because if I didn't," Darcy says quietly, "I wouldn't deserve to be her mother." Sterling watches her. For the first time tonight, maybe for the first time in many years, he looks at a woman not with judgment, not with suspicion, not with power, but with the eyes of a single father recognizing a single mother, 2 people crushed by life in different ways, sitting here in a cold kitchen, holding the only child they have, trying to keep them alive. A silence longer than normal passes. No one speaks, but that silence isn't empty. It's warm. "Craig will never lay a hand on Nell," Sterling says. His voice is calm, but every word carries the weight of an oath Darcy knows he'll keep, because Sterling Blackwood doesn't make empty promises, and the way he keeps them isn't the way ordinary people keep them. "I guarantee it." He stands. Before he leaves the kitchen, he stops in the doorway and looks back. "Arlo asked your name," he says. He said, "She promised, and she kept her word. He wants to see you." Darcy smiles. The first smile of the night, small, exhausted, but real. "Tell him I'll come." Sterling nods. Then he adds, "Your grandpa, is he still alive?" "He's gone," Darcy says softly. Sterling nods again, slow and heavy. "He taught you well." Then he leaves. Darcy sits alone in the empty kitchen. Dawn begins to seep through the small window above the sink, gentle, a soft pink orange, laying itself over Nell's sleeping face. Darcy looks at her hands, still streaked with plaster dust in the creases, dried blood under her nails. Last night, the richest and most powerful people in the city sat in this house, raising glasses, dancing, laughing. No one heard, no one saw, but a 4-year-old girl heard, and a single mother, a woman paid to be invisible, chose to step into the light. Nell stirs in her lap, eyelids fluttering, then open. Big brown eyes look up at Darcy, sleepy, dazed. "Mom," Nell whispers. "Is the wall done crying now?" Darcy smiles, tears rolling down her cheeks, warm and light. Not the tears of misery, but the tears of someone who has walked through darkness and found dawn. "Yes, baby, the wall is done crying," and that's where we stop with Darcy and Arlo's story. Sometimes in life, the smallest people, the ones the world tells to stay quiet, are the ones who hear the clearest cries for help that no one wants to hear. Real courage doesn't come from power or money. It comes from the heart of someone willing to lose everything, to do the right thing. I want to ask you, how did this story make you feel? Was there a moment that touched you? And in real life, have you ever had to face a hard choice between your own safety and what you knew was right? Share with me in the comments below. I read every single comment, and I always want to hear your stories, your feelings from deep in your heart. If today's story touched you, please hit like and share it so more people can hear it. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe so we can meet every day with new stories. I wish all of you watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peaceful days. Thank you for listening. Goodbye, and I'll see you in the next video.